Hello, my name is Alexandra Strong, a research nurse and part-time MPhil Gerontology Aging Studies student at Swansea University. Today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of older people as research participants in clinical trials and COVID-19, which forms the start of my MPhil research into what was the role of older people in clinical research during the COVID-19 pandemic, a critical analysis of the attitudes of all stakeholders, older people, research practitioners and study sponsors. So, older people and population aging. So we already know that we have an aging population. Since 1980, the population of those aged over 60 has more than doubled. Population aging has become a global phenomenon. We do know that in the United Kingdom the prevalence of long-term conditions and polypharmacy increases with age. We know that there have been only low increases in life expectancy at birth in recent years, and that the increase in healthy life expectancy has still not kept pace with this. The 4 devolved nations of the United Kingdom all have different policies to enable the needs and interests of older people, but mostly these focus on active ageing, which is great, but it does lead me to question whether we are missing that some older people will age with long-term chronic conditions and polypharmacy. There are no policies in the UK directly linked to the inclusion of older people in clinical trials. However, the UK Equality Act does ban the discrimination of people by age with some exceptions. So this slide shows we already have a firm basis in which we should be advocating the inclusion of older people in research as clinical participants. So, older people as research participants, what do we know? Since the 1980s, there's been a call to ensure the inclusion of older people as research participants in clinical trials. This coincided with a change in direction in theories of ageing, from those that suggest older people withdraw from society to more inclusive needs-based critical theories, whilst observing the effects of medical models of ageing. Assumptions include change is slow and participant age isn't always representative of the population where the illness is prevalent. This can be seen in heart disease and hip fracture studies. But we do know that a decrease in unjustifiable age exclusions has happened. We also know that if older people are not included in clinical trials, safety and efficacy of medication for older people cannot be assured. We know some of the reasons include bias and ageism, and again back to those assumptions. We think that people have made assumptions that there will be a link with older age and an increase in SAE, AE and AE of special interest reporting, that there will be an increase with access problems to clinical research, and polypharmacy, and the business strategies of pharmaceutical companies also come into play, that an increase in multiple comorbidities and dropout rates, and not knowing the effects of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics means that older people are excluded often from research. But personally, I think these are reasons that we actually should be advocating the inclusion of older people in clinical trials. When we have asked older people, which has been not very frequently, they have said that they do want to participate. They have said that the reasons for this include altruism, feeling useful, and getting extra healthcare. They've also said reasons that they don't want to participate are due to distance and access to clinical research and a burden of extra study visits. Some of the things we know that can potentially work have been recruitment registries, charters and frameworks that have been set up aiming to increase the inclusion of older people as research participants. But there's been little or no follow-up, so we really don't know how these have worked. So, older people in clinical trials and COVID-19. In January 2020, a new disease, COVID-19, was confirmed to have been caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus and has quickly turned into a global pandemic, which has swept through countries at a rapid rate. We simply do not know enough about this disease, but we do know that it has had a profound effect on everyone, and we are learning more and more about the disease every day. It has turned the world of non-COVID-19 and COVID-19 clinical trials in older people upside down. Many clinical trials were halted, stopped, or have been turned to remote study visits only. All of this has consequences for older people, their participation in current studies and in the future, and of course their future health. Charity funders are reviewing the amount of money that they can spend on research, for example the British Heart Foundation and cancer research. Again, this has consequences for older people's health moving forward. Older people have been considered at higher risk of severe ill health from COVID-19, especially those aged over 70, and have been advised to strictly social distance for months now. But what is the long-term effect of this, and how is this taking its toll on people, and how does it affect them accessing normal healthcare as well as research? Research is part of the UK government response to combat this pandemic. Research that would normally take years has been put together in months. Despite calls from bodies such as the British Geriatric Society to include older people in this research, there has still been considerable concern that they just won't be. But we don't know if this is true, we don't know whether that will last long term, and we don't know the reasons why. A review by Alexandra et al. Conducted in March this year found there was cause for concern that older people would not be included in COVID-19 trials, that the mean ages of participants was low, and that the chance of being excluded from a trial to do with COVID-19 increased with age. But we need older people to be in part of these trials, particularly as it seems to so unfairly affect older people so much. Steps in the right direction, though. This include the Oxford University vaccine trial, which specifically had a recruitment phase for older people aged 70 and over, because they needed to assess the differences in the immune response to the vaccine and if there were any with age. A review that I conducted in May 2020 showed none of the CTIM NIHR urgent public interventional COVID-19 studies excluded on age alone, but there is only one specifically designed for older people, the principal trial. The recovery trial in dexamethasone has had a great success, and the rates of participants of older people aged 70 and above, was actually 46%, which is pretty good. This trial showed that dexamethasone did have a positive effect for COVID-19 patients requiring oxygen or ventilation, and the MHRA advised use of it for this within 24 hours of the release of the positive data by the study team. But we also have to think of cautions. Publication of all data, whether it's positive or negative, needs to happen. We need to publish why studies didn't continue if they didn't continue, those that have been successful, those that haven't been successful. We need to accurately assess the inclusion of older people in these clinical trials, making sure that that data is accurate and used appropriately. We only need to think back to the controversy around hydroxychloroquine back at the beginning of the pandemic just to highlight this. So what next? For me, it's to answer the question, what was the role of older people in clinical research during the COVID-19 pandemic? To start with, I will conduct a content analysis of the protocols of the CTIM NIHR urgent public interventional COVID-19 studies in relation to the inclusion of older people across the 4 devolved nations. After this, a review of the results of these studies will need to happen to see what the relation there is then to the inclusion of older people, looking at the mean ages of people included and their comorbidities. Furthermore, an e-survey asking older people, research practitioners and study sponsors about their attitudes about the role of older people as research participants during the COVID-19 pandemic will happen. I then plan to conduct focus groups, which may need to be conducted remotely, of older people, research practitioners and study sponsors to discuss the role of older people in clinical research during the COVID-19 pandemic, and with the overall aim of forming a framework to support the role of older people as research participants, which could be adaptable for use during times of and times outside of a global pandemic, and if this pandemic continues, how we can ensure that older people continue to be included as research participants. So that just leaves me to say thank you for listening, and I hope you found this information, and any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.